Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the World Affairs Council, dear friends of the Moscow Zeitgeist Foundation. I'm Klaus Becker, and I'm the chairman of the Zeitgeist Foundation. It's a great honor to work again with the team of LJ. It's just a wonderful cooperation, and we thank you very, very much that you always jump on the boat when we have an idea or a new speaker, and you never say no. Today I would like to particularly mention we have several series together. We share ambassadors, but we share also CEOs from German-minded companies. And as you might know, it has become a staple and a tradition of our both corporations, to invite outstanding speakers. So we have the CEO of BMW here, of Porsche here, of Hapag-Lloyd, of Schaeffler, or Lufthansa. And today, however, I believe we have reached a special high point. We have an outstanding personality as a keynote speaker, and I want to explain that a little bit. BASF, as most of you know, by the way, has also a large branch here in Charlotte. BASF is the largest chemical company in the world, and it was Jörg Wuttke who turned the location in China into a bigger location than the headquarters in Germany. And for your understanding, who doesn't know where the headquarters in Germany is, that is basically a whole city of almost 200,000 people. Ludwigshafen, you say Ludwigshafen, it is BASF, it's congruent, it's the same thing. And he made the China location bigger than that. This is one side of it. The other side is that he was always involved in civic and industrial associations. So he was the head of the European Chamber of Commerce in Beijing, where he lived for more than 35 years. And today, and in this role, let me say that too, because I have heard his name before out of the media in Germany, because he was always very well known there. And he was, I read his name in the Spiegel, in the Zeit, and so on. And he was never shy to say something in all clarity which other people did not dare to say in the powerful empire of China. And he got away with it. Today he is partner in DJA Partners in Washington. And those of you who don't know exactly what DJA Partners stands for, let me tell you, the A in the DJA stands for Madeleine Albright. And he is, with that combination, he is the perfect joint between the World Affairs Council, geopolitical side, and the CEO series which we are having together with them. In times, let me conclude, in times where it looks as if Europe is sandwiched between the two large powers, and it looks right now as if they don't play a bigger role than just the salad leaf between the two slices of bread. It is more important to hear from somebody who knows all sides, the sides of three continents of China, Europe, and the United States. With that, I ask you to help me welcome Jörg Wuttke.
All right, lieber Klaus, LJ, thank you very much for inviting me to come over here. I have to clarify first. This plants, the plants that we established in China, and BASF is around 100 factories in about 20 locations in China. We are far away from Ludwigshafen in the sense they have 200 factories in one spot, 8 square kilometer, and so we're not there yet in China, but working on it. Very happy to be here. I chose the title of Shall I Stay or Shall I Go? Some of you might know that it is a famous Clash song, and from 1982, and 82 was the year I went to China the first time by train. So I boarded the train in Heidelberg and passed the Soviet Union and Mongolia, ended up in Shanghai, fell in love with the food, with the country, and decided to make that a career. Turns out to be 35 years living in China, so it has been great reward for myself. Now the Clash song came out, as you know, vinyl in '82. It's the A side. The B side is Straight to Hell. But I will not go down this road. I have prepared about 20 minutes of speech, and then we can have a vivid Q&A session, I guess. And I just wanted to start with pinpointing to someone who actually knows China incredibly well, is my co-Washingtonian, Kevin Rudd, used to be the Prime Minister of Australia. He's now Australia's ambassador to the United States, fluent in Chinese, much better than mine. And he came out with a book. During COVID, he, in his late 60s, wrote a PhD in Oxford about what Xi Jinping is thinking. And it's a really strong PhD. You don't have to read the book. Kevin himself would say, first 2 chapters, last 2 chapters. In the middle, it's a lot of Marx and Engels and Hegel and whatever, Lenin. But if you really want to get a crash course on how Xi Jinping is thinking, go online, go to YouTube, look Kevin Rudd, how is Xi Jinping thinking? He did great shows doing exactly that. So what is the executive summary of Kevin's book? It is basically that Xi Jinping has single-handedly changed China into a different direction. In politics, he has, as Kevin puts it, turned China to the left, made communism real again, after communism was sort of a bit of a poster, but not really. It was Manchester capitalism in China. But in 2012, September, he became party chairman, and in March 13, he became president of China. He has virtually introduced Leninism again, and with all its downsides that I could witness myself, the control of media, the control of NGOs, the kind of political messaging that he was evoking. On the economy, he has also turned to Marxism. So politically, turned China to left means he became more Leninist, and when it comes to the economy, he had changed China more towards Marxism and control. That is quite different from what the idea was from Deng Xiaoping, my hero, who actually got China out 78 out of the central system. In particular, after the shooting in '89, where China basically went into shock for 3 years, nothing happened. He did a trip to the south and says, guys, you really have to get rich, and you have to get actually going. And after he kicked President Jiang Zemin's butt, China opened up tremendously. The real opening up of China started, I would say, in essence, because of him in late '92. And what a start it was. So decentralized it was. We had a fantastic prime minister who I know quite well, Zhurongji, 1998 to 2003, who actually introduced competition. He opened this. It was the time of really opening up. And now we have the sense that China is closing up again, politically, intellectually, but also in business. It becomes more and more hard for foreign business to have a footprint there. Hence the question, should I stay or should I go? And then on foreign affairs, Kevin puts it that China turns to the right. It's more nationalistic, more populist than before, and it has been rather successful recently. As you've seen in Korea, everybody was lining up to meet him, and I think he left Korea as a statesman. They achieved that actually the U.S. has been holding back a couple of actions, and I think the Chinese have incredibly well read how Donald Trump is thinking and how to deal with him. I can go into the Q&A session into that one. But in essence, what Xi Jinping has been basically figuring out is that you don't make a big deal with Donald Trump. You make a small deal here, another deal there, and you go from escalation to de-escalation, escalation, de-escalation. I think that's going to be the pattern over the next 3 years, 4 years at least. Because Xi Jinping actually has misread, I think, Trump and Trump won. First of all, he went to Mar-a-Lago right away, and he took it as a gesture. And the next thing he sees is the trade war coming out. He went to Beijing. He invited Trump to Beijing, and it was an incredible show. He really rolled out the red carpet. and that wasn't really answered. And phase one, which was concluded in January 2020, just when COVID hit China, actually was sort of a bullying of China. You have to buy this, you have to buy that, you have to do the following and so forth. Managed trade, as we would call it in Europe. So in a way, they prepared themselves well, as the Chinese always do, and came up with a completely different agenda. So when the White House thought that they can bully China again and believing that China is weak because the economy is not doing too well, they were very surprised that China is hitting back, and they found the stealth weapon, which is rare earths, of course. So it's going to remain difficult. Now Donald Trump is going to Beijing in April, and Xi Jinping will come to Miami or to Florida in December for G20. And let's see how we develop, how US and China get along there. So when it comes to the economy, it's very interesting to see we're limping along in China. The growth has been slowing down tremendously, partly because the bubble was bursting, the real estate bubble, which is with construction standing for 20-25% of the Chinese economy. And if 25% of your economy is in trouble, you cannot expect to have the country growing at 5%. Among my friends, nobody believes the 4 to 5% data sets, in essence, and I'll come to this later, is a big challenge in China. So we have basically an economy which still is in some segments going very strong, in particular in the future-oriented segments, AI, and particular in the green technologies, And there's a pattern. I mean, China has just last week had a fourth plenum, and the messaging clearly was, we want to be self-reliant. Self-reliant is always bad news for us because it means they don't need us anymore. And they have a very strong program lined up because they want to be less reliant on the United States, on Europe. They want to basically, that's an old Mao thinking, again, Kevin Roth's book, about not being bullied around by someone. And self-reliance means that they are planning to be less self-reliant, and it's called the 5-year plan. It will be outlined in great detail next March. We know already what's in there. And as I was founding the European Chamber in 2000, I was chair for 10 years. We started with 50 companies, and when I left, we had 9 cities, 1,800 companies under the European Chamber. I launched a report on Made in China 2025 in March 2017. It was Bob Lighthizer favorite piece of thing in order to prepare himself. So in 2025, they said they're going to be having certain market share in certain product lines, And I warned basically, based on a study I did the year before in 2016, where I outlined the mechanism of overcapacity in China. I had the honor of briefing Secretary Yellen last year in Guangzhou on overcapacity before she met Vice Premier Khalifan. And the mechanism in China is that China always, whatever it plans, ends up in overcapacity. Because they're projecting demand, there will be money behind it, they keep the foreigners out. And then a former minister who actually told me that, an open mice on overcapacity mechanisms in China. And then basically you have 150,000 local and regional SOEs replicating themselves. And of course, as they are state-owned enterprises, SOEs, they don't go bankrupt, they keep going. So we have a situation where China, whatever it plans, ends up in overcapacity. So in 2017, in March, I launched this big study on where will China be in 2025. In essence, I was saying China will have overcapacity in batteries, in EVs, in wind turbines, in solar panels, and in base chemicals, because that's exactly what was in the plan. So when the new 15th 5-year plan comes out in March, pay real attention to what they're planning, because you might end up seeing the Chinese rolling over you if you're in the business lines on robotics, on biotechnology, and other areas. They really want to focus on the top end of this. That is going to be a massive problem, particularly for European companies globally, because whatever again China has now, it ends up in the global markets and is pushing us against the wall. On trade, let me first go into trade. In trade, we have seen basically that China has, I wouldn't say stopped buying stuff from Europe, but our exports to China have been nosediving, double digit. Last year, European Union companies sold more to Switzerland than to China. And the ratio of containers going to Europe is 4, and going back is 1. You know, the ratio until Trump installed a couple of tariffs with the United States was 5-1, and the ratio, partly also courtesy to Klaus' business, to Mexico is 11-1. So there's a trade imbalance of staggering amounts there. So in a way, China is just exporting so much because they have lack of local consumption. They have overcapacity. And they, in particular on EVs, they have managed to build chips because that was the constraint that China was facing. They couldn't export the cars because this roll-on-roll-off ships were missing. And you know, normally the industry buys about 4 ships every year, mostly Norwegian and Israeli and other companies. And China, within 4 years, ordered 114. So they add export capacity of 1 million cars a year, and it's coming our way. Our way, I mean Europe, because China basically faces closed borders on EV cars over here. So it's like a safety valve, you know. And the problem is that, you know, they want to produce more. They already now, 1/3 of global production is in China. So every third product, real product, is made in China. And the plan for 2030, the end of the 5-year plan, is 42. So they're telling the world is like, you know, and it's a zero-sum game, it's like, you know, we produce more, you produce less. And that will lead to quite some trade tensions, I would say, not only with the United States, as it happens, also with Europe. Europe will definitely come up with protectionist mechanism to safeguard the industrial ecosystem. But it actually is going to hammer emerging markets that want to establish a industrial landscape. For example, Thailand has done anti-dumping cases against Chinese imports. You have Brazil, Turkey, and my most favorite is, as told by my Russian wife, is Russia. Basically, China was selling last year 1 million cars to Russia, 1 million cars, because they get no cars from anybody else at this stage. And the 1 million cars, mostly, I think 98% are internal combustion engines, so not EVs. And they basically pushed the Russian car industry, there is such a thing, against the wall. And that led the car industry to go to President Putin and say, you have to save us from the Chinese. And he did. In December last year, he installed a recycling fee on Chinese imported cars of $7,500. So that's about 750,000 rubles. That's quite a lot of money. And what happened is they went from peak September last year, cars imported from China, 165,000 to 15,000 cars in February. So even dear friend Russia is closing the border for this kind of avalanche that we have seen coming out of that country. Now on foreign direct investment, the investment from Europe is very small in China. It's about every year 7 to 9 billion euro. And 75% is coming out of Germany, and mostly from big companies like the car industry, BASF, Bosch, and so forth. The French stand for 14% only. So it becomes very tilted towards Germany as well as towards big companies. And we have seen that small companies are putting investment channel on hold because they don't know where the economy is heading, overcapacity, and other challenges they face. But they're not leaving. We don't see companies really seriously leaving China. But as a matter of fact, some put more money into China. Why is that the case? And that's where it says, you know, shall I stay or shall I go? That's where they stay, because China is a fitness center. They actually have an incredible deep bench of engineers. And as a Chinese friend told me, innovation is brain meets demand. You know, they have the demand story, they have the brand, the brains. 50 from the top 100 universities globally in chemicals is in China. 50 of the top construction engineering universities globally is in China. 44 instrumentation out of medicine, 2 out of 100, so that's where the US has more than 40. So China is not across the board absolutely champion. But if you have a shortage of chemical engineers, as we faced in Germany, BASF built up an engineering center in Chengdu, Sichuan, with 7 people in 2014-17, and now 400 when I left last year. So in a way, the company has outsourced this facility planning to Chengdu. Of course, they work with their colleagues in Ludwigshafen or in other places around the world. But that's where the strength is, and that's where the German car industry is pouring a lot of money in there, because the German car industry feels very strongly we have to unlearn how to build cars, and we have to learn how to build mobile phones on wheels. And the only place they can do this is China. When I last year, the year before, briefed our foreign minister Annalena Baerbock, I was with the CEO of Volkswagen. And of course, she was going after BASF Volkswagen. You're too big in China. You put in more money, and so forth. And the CEO from Volkswagen said, "But Madam Minister, we are driving behind. We are 2 years behind on body and 6 years behind in digital. And the body, they have to work with XPeng together to actually catch up with the Chinese, because it's EV based and totally different. And on digital, it's just they use Chinese engineers in order to help them. The Chinese are gadget crazy, digital minded. And just to give you 2 examples where they really stand out, and this data is from BMW. An average Chinese is scrolling 3.1 kilometers on the mobile phone every day. Possibly matched by my children, but an average Chinese is sitting 1.6 hours a day in a non-moving vehicle, and I don't talk about traffic jams. They actually parking lot in front of the house and elsewhere, because they enjoy the interior of the car, the sound system, to the point where the latest BYD model has installed a drone on top of the roof of the car. So if you run out of coffee or a drink, you can fly to the shop and get them coming back again. So I'm not sure you will buy this in Charlotte or in my hometown Heidelberg, but it just showcases that they are pushing the envelope, And the Chinese are extremely disloyal when it comes to product relationship. If my father is a Benz driver, I'm a Benz driver, my son will drive Benz possibly. In China, if the car is not cool enough, then I don't buy it. So the lifetime of a car is very short, meaning you have to be very different in your approach of what materials you use. I wouldn't say that German companies learn to be a little more shabby underneath the hood, but they have to be brilliant when everything they can touch in a car has to be top-notch, But beneath the car, they don't believe in 10-year cycles, and it has to be fast. So the German car companies are using their China outlets to become faster. There's such a thing like learning. And they come from 4 years of a new product to 3 years. Still, they try to aim at 2 years cycle, because BYD brings out a new product every 2 years. So in Shanghai, Volkswagen, Stellantis, in other places has managed to get down to 3 years. And the interesting thing, and that's why I say it's fitness center, is that these companies are in a location where they then can learn how to be different and try to replicate this in their facilities around the world. And it showcases also in R&D centers. Actually, it's called research and development, but I rarely see research centers in China. It's mostly a big fat D, where you actually are with your customer and you try to come up with new applications, whereas research is still being done in Germany or in the United States or Singapore for IPR reasons, but also it's very easy to attract talents from China to settle in Germany. And you have this freedom of making decisions there. So D-center it is, I once guided our Prime Minister of the state where BASF is located, Rhineland-Palatina, through the D-center in Shanghai, R&D center. And we had 10 booths lined up, and first one she asked, how long did it take? And I said 15 months. How long does it take in Ludwigshafen? 24 months, So there is this kind of risk-taking that you learn in China. Your customers pushing you very hard and say, if you take another 8 months, the market has moved on. My competitor is faster, so you better be fast. So what you do is you actually learn how to actually revamp your way of thinking in order to get this out. And again, the learning has to be back home. So the guy who was running this D-Center in Shanghai is now BASF's head of research development in Ludwigshafen and with Winterling. So in a way, that is very important. I think that's very important for US companies to stay engaged in China, to be in that fitness center. And it's politically very challenging. I exceeded my 20 minutes, and I'm very happy to do a Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just want to emphasize one point. My name is Scott Tozier. I was former CFO for Albemarle Corporation, involved with the batteries and the lithium industry, very involved in China. I was in Santiago, Chile a couple of years ago, and I got a chance to drive a BYD car. At the time, I was driving a Tesla. I came home and I was like, I've got to find a BYD. It's that different. Tesla here is thought of as a big innovative company. Unfortunately, it is not. It's an also-ran if you look at the global world. So, as you're thinking about your questions, I have one to start with, if I could, and we're going to have to share the microphone. So your education is in economics and business management, but early in your career, you made a choice to learn Chinese.
Yes.
Maybe you could reflect a little bit about how that affected your career and your thinking and your understanding of China.
Well, I had a good friend in the 70s in Germany who just came back from Afghanistan. He had very funky friends studying Indian and so forth. I just passed high school, I made my exams and didn't know what to do. And if you know the southwest of Germany, it's beautiful, but it's very boring, unlike chocolate. And so he said, why don't you do Chinese? I said, oh, that's cool, it's very different, But 1980, to choose Chinese was basically deciding to import tea and to think about Mao Zedong. And so when I told my mother that I'm going to study Chinese, she cried. Unfortunately, in an open restaurant, so it was quite of a scene, and she thought that I'm going to fail. And then 82, and then basically it was very interesting when I applied for the German government for funding to go to Shanghai in 84 to study there. Among 20 of my colleagues, we were only 20 in Heidelberg studying Chinese. I was the only one who was rejected because I had an unrealistic job wish. I wanted to become a manager. And I failed there and also in the foundation, Friedrich Naumann, because they asked me, what do you want to sell them? So basically, that's why I decided in 84 to move to Taipei, Taiwan, and pretend to be Scots so I could teach English. And I was a photo model for a couple of things. And so, so in a way, I had the great luck of studying in an authoritarian system in Taiwan. At that time, was Kuomintang dictatorship, evolving into a democracy, and then basically experiencing the real China, meaning China without cultural evolution and greatly forward impact. Taiwan was a great place to live among the middle class. And so for me, it was easy always to criticize China because I criticized the system, but not the country.
Okay, so questions from the audience. Maybe I'll start with Mike right in the middle.
Or this is
Mike Hawley. This is the promised 30,000-foot question that I promised you. And I wonder if you agree with this, but when we admitted China to the WTO, I'm not sure we fully understood exactly what the implications were, but it seems to folks like me that it was the beginning of a large global clash between economic systems and government systems, with the Chinese effectively operating under the great warrior Sun Tzu's art of war, and with us responding recently with the art of the deal. And it's quite a complicated situation, and I wonder if you could give us some high-level perspective on this clash, if you agree it is one, and what the potential is. Thank you.
Well, Janine Barshevsky is a good friend of mine, and I asked her recently, do you think it was a mistake to let China get into WTO? And she says, no, I don't think so. I don't think so either. I think that China actually, during a period of time when also the technology, the internet came up and everything, at the same time unleashed a revolution. That revolution basically ends up with a two dominating China. And I must say that many job losses in the US and also Europe, I would say, can be blamed on China, but actually it's the technology gains that took place, that over a period of time. China actually played quite well in 2005, 2006, and they enriched us. We could sell a lot of stuff. We were extremely successful in investing. We pumped dividends from China back to our headquarters. And then basically what happened was the great financial crisis in 2008, 2009, And that's where I think roads diverged. The road not taken by China was basically the capitalist road, because they realized that our system is out of control and that their system is better. And the minister who was heading the Banking Regulatory Commission, he was Mr. Bank in China, told me during this period of time, it's like, Jörg, we lost our example. You are not our example anymore, Then the kind of trying to be in trade agreements and this and that was trampled on by Trump 1, but also China was actually looking at why did Britain leave the biggest free trade zone in the world, So these three events actually led China to believe it's like, oh, they're gone. And on top of it, they have this guy in the Politburo now, Wang Huning, who was, as a young man, 6 months in the US traveling through 30, 40 cities, 92. And he wrote a book about it, he published it in 96 in Shanghai, outlining what he thinks will happen to the United States. And the book's title is available in English. It's called America versus America. He was outlining basically that America will be diverging and will basically use a lot of internal problems, and China will be the winner. So this kid in 1992 already saw it coming, and now, of course, the guy is floating. Everybody in Politburo believes he's the America specialist. So we have to watch that space whenever he says something on America, because he has the president's ear there. Where will it all go? I think that if China doesn't change its direction and tries to replicate again this kind of export boom, the kind of rolling over other countries, will lead to a lot of trade tensions, again, not only with OECD countries, but also with the global south. And that's why I think what the US is doing right now, basically withdrawing from all organizations of matter, or basically showing no interest, offending allies and so forth, comes at the worst possible time. So if we would have done TPP, we would have had a massive foothold in Asia with the Americas. So for the Europeans, they have to now wake up, get out of our comfort zone, stop being complacent, and not only fix our miserable defense spending, but also actually reach out and find allies for trade, but also for materials and so forth. So what I'm seeing is that while the US is withdrawing, the Chinese will definitely enter that space everywhere, very aggressively. Europe, we are not a superpower. We have 28 different voices in the 27 Union. We'll have to go in and try to make as many free trade agreements as possible. And that's exactly happening right now. It's Brazil, Mercosur. We did a piece on Mexico. There is Indonesia signed up recently, and maybe next month, if it really happens, there will be a free trade agreement of India with Europe.
Will we see more state capitalism in the West than we have in hundreds of years?
Yeah, that's the danger. That's the danger I see, is that we try to replicate a part of the Chinese system, which I think is not sustainable. We don't have to replicate the industrial policy. Also, in view of the fact that their system is growing out from something very, very different. I forgot again my speech. Because China is facing incredible headwinds, not only local debt. Basically, in 2027, 28, they will reach bottom in the real estate crisis. But the biggest crisis I see is demographic. They will get older because of the one-child policy. They will get older than the United States by 2030. They will get older than the European Union by 2046. They get older than Japan by 2064. And they, in 2085, when they reach my age group, 65 and above, there will be more people in China of that age group than between 15 and 64. Unprecedented, has never happened before anywhere in any society, you know. So in a way, China now, and that is, by the way, also interesting. There's a very good Chinese professor at Wisconsin University who claims that China doesn't have 1.4 but 1.3 billion people. I said to him, how is that possible? You know, where are these 100 billion? He said, it doesn't exist. They are in the books of the Chinese authorities, but like Google's dead souls, they don't exist. Why? Because this commission that was in charge of the one-child policy didn't want to sort of admit that China's population was shrinking faster than they actually announced, because they didn't want to get dissolved as an organization. And the second is the birth certificates. You know, you can have 5, 6, 7 birth certificates if you are in different provinces. So the numbers, again, numbers in China, is overreported. So we have possibly 100 million non-existent Chinese in the books, you know. And of course, when I asked him who that group is, he said, of course, very young people. I mean, not very young, not existing people, because they don't age, obviously. But the second is they have been invented over the last 20 years. So the aging that I mentioned, these figures, will be in his books faster than anywhere else. So China, in the 15th five-year plan, acknowledges it by putting all the emphasis on AI, on robotics, on biotechnology, because they know they have incredible demographic headwinds. Demoscopic headwinds, 114 male to 1 woman. And already the pool of women able to bear children is getting lower and lower. So since COVID beginning, China has closed 20% of its kindergartens.
Good. Who's next? Where are you? There's a microphone.
Thanks, and welcome to Charlotte. The question that I will ask has to do with civic society and the role of civic society, particularly with the culture of China, which at its foundations is about relationships. First, welcome to Charlotte, where we, in our public school system, have 4 schools that offer a Chinese immersion with hundreds of students participating, and not a single mother I know who has shed a tear. We're very proud of the relationships that we have with China, a 4-decade-long relationship with Baoding, our sister city, memorandum of understanding with Shenzhen, and of course, beyond education, civic partnerships. The deputy mayor of Baoding was here earlier this year, folks from the Chinese embassy. I'm wondering, where does civic society relationships play into the future of the relationship between our 2 countries?
I think the interest of Chinese to expose themselves to the West or to the East, meaning Japan and others, is very, very high. As a matter of fact, so high that when I left Beijing, I lived in a very nice compound with lots of venture capitalists and top-notch Chinese entrepreneurs. 1/3 of the houses were empty, you know, meaning for a year, these organizations facilitate that about 17 to 20,000 millionaires are leaving China, you know. So at the top end, you see an exodus of talents going to Singapore, to Dubai, to Tokyo, and other places. I've yet to have to find someone who wants to move to Germany. So maybe Charlotte is, but also the US has been going down. So top end is basically, they see the writing on the wall. The president will go after the rich people, so better get out now, but keep a foothold in there, meaning they don't sell the houses. Civic society is a sad story because in China itself it is very hard. Most of the embassy events are being cancelled or bullied, or people told not to go, not to attend. Next week I'm going to be in Beijing. I was supposed to be at the German embassy, and they wanted to invite a professor, an energy specialist, and he has to come with a minder. You know, that was never happening before. So in a way, Xi Jinping, again, control Leninism as it is, wants to cut this kind of engagement in China, and makes it more difficult for people to travel. So I'm very happy to hear that they're still coming from Baoding to here. And so there is still engagement, but it's way below potential, way below potential. The real danger I see is that our young people lose interest in China and want to study less Chinese. So that is a real worry ahead. I mean, we have 600,000 Chinese studying in the United States, I think. It's about 1,000 Americans studying in China. 1,000. It was down to 300 during COVID. And in my hometown Heidelberg, there's this East Asia Institute, and it was nowhere in 1980 on China. Then it was by far the biggest, was the Chinese division. And now it's number 3. So there are more Germans studying Korean and Japanese than Chinese in the house as possible. So we are losing a generation with empathy and understanding of the most important nation in Asia that we have to deal with. And so we really try to always get this across as, so my kids are anyhow native in Chinese, but I encourage them to stay that way. Native various degrees.
Very good. Who's next? How about right here in the front?
You do it in Chinese, huh?
So thank you for your talk. I found it very interesting to hear you describe China as a fitness center. And what that brought to my mind was a lot of the complaints you hear from American companies when they went into China, had to form joint ventures, or other Western companies. They felt like the Chinese were taking their IP or their know-how and then could shut them out of the market. That's one of the allegations that's been out there from various folks. And I see a little bit of that in there too. They're learning, if now European companies are learning from their Chinese counterparts and trying to take that back to Europe or elsewhere in the West. How long is China going to let that happen? Do you think that they see that as a threat, and that there will be a time when that flow of information is cut off so that it can't be exported back to the West?
Well, again, China's wish is to become self-reliant, meaning that they leave little space for us to have stuff which they don't have. They're still there in machine building. Definitely, Germany is still something to offer, but it is a real threat. The problem we have with China is, for example, I have been promoting that China is moving companies to Europe. Trying to lure them into our economy to help us get this process going of unlearning how to build cars and building EVs. And Germany is still open. We have CATL, we have BYD in Hungary, and so there's still an appetite for Chinese engagement. In particular, also because in the past it has been incredibly successful. Volvo was mismanaged by Ford and saved by Geely. And so in a way, we had other companies where it didn't go too well. Pirelli sort of challenged. We had a Chinese company that virtually was bankrupt, but was buying everything left and right and center, including Syngenta and Pirelli and Adidas and stuff like that. So in a way, and I always said, bring them in so they become stakeholder of our economy, in particular greenfield, But it has reached now again a discussion level that makes it very difficult because, as you've seen in Nexperia, a Dutch company that was bought by Chinese a couple of years ago, where the Chinese actually blocked the merger of Qualcomm and XP at that time. So the Chinese took it over, and the CEO from this company, Big Tech, has been stripping off assets in Holland. And the Dutch did what the Dutch do, is they went to the court, and the court says, we have to take over the company. This is a big mess, a very big mess, and it will. And the Chinese are very upset about it because now worry that it sets an example of you can take assets away from the Chinese while they are trying to go global. So it is something where it's going to get very tricky how to solve this problem, to unbundle these challenges. So in a way, I think we want the Chinese, but we don't want some of the behavior of the Chinese that actually comes along. Mostly successful, but there are quite challenges. I think the Chinese entrepreneurs definitely want to go global because they see the writing on the wall. The economy is slowing down, the headwinds are coming, and on top of it, they themselves feel threatened by Xi Jinping. Saying, I'm a communist, surprise, surprise. And so in a way, we see this China, and then on top of it, of course, export controls. The U.S. started this game, the Chinese did it over the last years. It's very hard to get equipment out of China if you want to produce solar panels. And again, the whole thing about rare earth, the rare earth is actually not rare, it's the refining, which is the bottleneck. And the Chinese do not export this technology. So we have to learn how to do it either totally different, or we have to sort of see how we steal Chinese technologies and do it ourselves, you know. But the Chinese are playing hardball, and I think that is something which is going to be problematic, as a foreign investor in our societies, you know. To what extent can a Chinese entrepreneur sort of disregard messages from Xi Jinping and do things differently, you know, possibly zero? And to what extent do we let Chinese companies in our ecosystem where we just know at the final stage the decision makers are sitting in China?
I'm going to jump back there first, and then I'll come up here. Probably that's the last two. We'll see.
Hello. So bringing the Charlotte Sister Cities thing full circle, I was part of the pilot program. I was a teacher that went to Valdi in 2004 and then lived and worked in China until 2014. And I was working in ESL, international education, that type of thing. And at the time, the company that I worked for was incredibly popular. The Chinese division was the one that did the best, part of the Pearson Group. And since then, the whole company over there has dissolved and closed down, along with that closing. So my question has to do with the idea of, you know, work for a college, global education and English language learning and things that have been part of the education system for quite a while, entrenched by the time I got there. Do you still see that? Is global education, global learning, and learning other languages still something that is encouraged, or has it kind of, have you seen it closing?
Yeah. Well, in April 2013, so President Xi was in office as president for 1 month and as chairman of the party for about 5. A document leaked. It's called document number 9. And there it was basically his roadmap of where he wants China to go. And when I sort of made a report for my board out of that, they felt like this is Stalinism, you know, this cannot be true, this is not China, you know. And I said, well, he said it, you know, and I guess it's going to be leading there. Little did we know that actually it's exactly where he's heading. And part of that is imprint saying he disconnect the connections, disconnect the cooperation with embassies, scale back language English, scale back the international exchange, and make just sure that people are getting better educated, indoctrinated, in order to deal with foreigners. So we are at a very dark place, I would say. You know, books translated from English into Chinese very rare. Even children books are challenged, and books that they produce, basically the movie borders, movie messages, even to the point where Vladivostok is Chinese now. I had much to the work of my wife, and so so in a way, it is a very sad story, and also how the internet has been slowed down. How access to a lot of these websites that actually possibly educate Chinese about what's going on abroad are being cut down, and how basically CCTV and Xinhua and all these outlets have been misrepresenting, for example, Europe. You know, there's always a strike, there's always some violence in the streets and so forth. You know, and China's fine. So actually, the view of I mean, they're all based on real cases. You know, the French just love to have a problem, and the Germans just have all of these issues. But the way they're presented makes an image. It's like we don't want to be like Europeans, you know. So everybody is always complaining about Western media being too negative on China. You know, they have no idea how the Chinese media is reporting on our backyard. So misrepresenting it leads to a less interest in Western societies, frankly. You have lack of access, and you have that problem. And then, of course, it doesn't help if the funding for VOA stops. You know, we had at least one outlet that actually was listened to by many Chinese, and now basically went down. You know, so we're not supporting that thing. So unfortunately, I'm very pessimistic on that one.
time for one more question. Right here.
My question is, what do you think some of the implications may be with Xi having dismissed 9 of his top military people? What are some of the things we should be looking for, and what does that look for us longer term?
Yeah, one thing you learn in Beijing, you never know what the hell goes on. You know, it's just like Richard McGregor was FT head in Beijing. He moved to DC, and when I met Rich a year later, and I said, "So Rich, what's different between Beijing and Washington?" I said, "Beijing nobody talks, and Washington they can't shut up." So in a way, we don't know. You know, 22 out of 33 Central Committee Bureau members were military background. 22 were not sitting in this Central Committee meeting, 22. And the interesting thing is the TV showed empty seats. So it was not camouflaged and there are someone to stand in. It was a clear message. It's like the army structure as it is today is not good enough, you know. So, and that comes from a guy that has been in charge now for 13 years. Basically, over the last 13 years, most of his top assignments were his decision. And he is the head of the military commission, and still one defense minister after the other, foreign minister, head of the foreign department in the international committee of the Communist Party, they all vanished, all gone, you know. So it means that two things, speculation, again, we don't know anything. One is the army has been in a rotten state, fiefdoms, private armies, and the generals bought their ticket, bought their job, meaning they're not capable. And I think Xi Jinping had a opening eye moment when he looked at the Soviet, Russian troops in Ukraine, where he felt like, you know, are my troops ready to invade Taiwan and get it? Are we ready to defend ourselves with that kind of corrupt army? And he came to the conclusion, possibly not, you know. So I think he said it in 2027, I want to have an army that can win a war. 2027 being the year of the 100th anniversary of the PLA. I think he really means it. You know, it was turned around by the Pentagon. 2027 is going to invade Taiwan. You know, certainly not. But again, his messaging was like, I have maybe great military kit, but I don't have the army, the structures, the communication models to lead a modern war and defend ourselves. I guess that's behind it. I think there's no coup d'etat. There is nobody who wants to sort of say, you know, enough is enough. Let's get rid of the old man.
Just a quick follow-up. So
Yeah.
almost all the commentary around each individual dealt with corruption.
Yeah.
The fact that he was accusing everybody of having some corrupt practices.
Yes.
In your estimation, is corruption something that is endemic throughout the whole system that
Yes.
he may be dealing with?
Absolutely, absolutely. Even in his own family, because any intransparent system breeds corruption. You know, there's no. You know, in the West, if you are found corrupt, then you lose your job. You know, and in China, if you lose your job, you're found to be corrupt. So in a way, it's just like you lose your protection. See, they're all corrupt, but once you have stepped on someone on a political toe, or you have not done something, then basically you lose your protection, and then it's easy to scratch on the surface.
Okay, thank you very much.